When you leave the playing field, you forfeit the game. When you leave the playing field, you forfeit the game to the other side. This is what happens when you leave the playing field, when you voluntarily decide not to participate in the game. You lose. And I wanted to make this podcast about not leaving the playing field, not surrendering the field to the opponent. Because when you do that, you lose by default. And I was reminded of this several days ago on Twitter when someone put out a tweet that said something to the effect that Harvard University is going to offer its classes by remote. And when I saw that, I thought, well, how typical is that? How pathetic. How pathetic and typical is that? Pathetic in the sense that students are basically at no risk at all. It's just a cautionary, ass-covering, chicken shit maneuver. But that's expected. That's expected. This is the way institutions behave, and this is the way some institutions behave when they want to cover their asses at all costs. That's all that matters. So all that's true. But at the same time, the problem with just not showing up, with not participating, because there were some responses that said, I wouldn't go, I wouldn't show up, I wouldn't be there, I wouldn't do anything, I wouldn't participate. But the problem is this. The problem is something that you may not have considered. No matter how bad the playing field may be, when you don't show up, when you don't participate, you forfeit the game. And the other side, the people that I call the unworthies, those who are unworthy of greater things, of higher things, they win by default. You can go off and skulk in your corner and cry and whine and boycott and play your little games, your little stand up to the world game, but it's not going to do any good. And it hasn't done good men any good in the past 30 to 40 years. This approach of not participating, of bowing out, of taking the, quote, high road, has turned out to be a disaster. Because what happens is that the unworthies rise to power, and they end up ruling over you. You're off skulking in your little corner playing video games and whining about the world. And meanwhile, the unworthies are in power, are in charge, lording it over you, doing their little thing and pursuing their little agendas. So you can have it your way. You can play your little games, but ultimately they go nowhere. So let me say first a few things to elaborate on what I'm talking about. I think that remote, quote, learning is a disaster. I totally agree. I don't think Zoom classes or remote learning is in any way, shape, or form a substitute for live interaction with human beings. Not in a million years. It's a inadequate, ineffective substitute. That much is given. That much is given. But does that mean that you forfeit your slot and you don't show up? If you've worked and labored hard to get somewhere, are you going to just bow out and say, I'm not going to participate? Let me ask you this. Do you think foreign students would do that? Do you think the female students are going to do that? No, absolutely not. They're going to be there. They're going to be there. They're going to stake their claim. They're going to plant their flag. They're going to stake their claim. And what are you going to do? What are you going to do? You're going to be off whining and boycotting. That's what a loser does. Let's face it. That's what a chicken shit does. That's what a loser does. Because look at the people that are saying, oh, you shouldn't show up. And what have they done? What kind of people are they? What are their achievements? What's their track record? And I think you'll usually find that the people advocating that you should sit down and collapse and bow out and do nothing, they're losers themselves. They're chicken shits themselves. I have no patience for that. This is the problem that we've had over the past 40 years. Good men, good people in general, have sat it out, have thrown in the towel, forfeited the game, And what happened is the unworthies all stayed there, and they rose up through the ranks, and pretty soon you have a whole bureaucracy and a whole leadership element full of these disgusting, inept chicken shit rats that are now running the show. These are people that have no sense of conscience, no sense of honor, no duty, no courage, nothing that would characterize them based on the traditional leadership traits and principles. They have nothing. And that's why our state, federal, and local governments are in such bad shape, is because the people that are running the show are all unworthy. They're unworthy. They're more interested in career. And when I say unworthy, again, don't try to, I'll tell you what I mean by that. An unworthy is someone who puts himself or herself before the public that they are required to serve. The unworthies are people who aggrandize themselves, pad their own resume, care about their own advancement, and nothing else. They're people that only are concerned with covering their asses. They're people that are hyper cautious. They're people that don't take any risks. They're people that do not have any vision. These are unworthies, and these are not the people that should be in leadership positions. We have got to get good people, good men and good women of character in these positions, in government, in industry, in business, in the military, everywhere. Everywhere. All of our institutions, because all we have now when you look around are complete unworthies, just contemptible individuals. And this is what really bothers me when I hear people say, oh, don't go to college, oh, don't show up if it's going to be on, don't do this, don't do that, don't do that. Okay, fine, you can be like that. But do you think that the unworthies are going to do that? No, they're going to show up and you're going to lose by default. Boycotting does no good in that sort of a situation. There are some situations when boycotts can do some good, but this is not one of them. This is not one of them. You have got to stake a claim. You have got to stand up for what you believe in. You have got to stake a claim. You have got to show up. And you know what? Even with all this, one thing you have to understand, all right, about a lot of this Zoom learning, this remote learning, I think a lot of that is overblown. I think a lot of that is just protective coloration that these institutions are talking about just to cover themselves. If you really got to the school or the city, there's going to be interaction with people. There's going to be young people meeting up. There's going to be groups forming, and things are going to happen. The universities don't have enough guts to say that. But until we get past all this psychological trauma that's been foisted on us in the past 6 months, this remote learning foolishness is a way for them to say that they're doing something. It's a way out. It's a chicken shit ass covering measure, but that's how it is. You have to just accept that. So my point in this and in so many other things is this: don't be so quick to just throw in the towel, to walk away, to surrender the field. You get in there, you stake a claim, you make yourself and your opinions and your views heard. And as long as you can back up what you're thinking and saying with logic, with reason, with facts, then you have nothing to fear. You have nothing to be afraid of. And this is what really, in many ways, is very unfortunate, is that when I look around, I see unworthy individuals that have risen to positions in politics, in government, industry, military, academia, whatever the field, whatever it is, whatever the profession. And they're simply people that just should not be there. And meanwhile, all the good men and the good women have basically thrown in the towel because they don't want to deal with the bullshit anymore. Well, guess what? That's not the way to go. That's not the way to go. I think we would not be in the situation that we are in right now if we had more good men and women in positions of power and responsibility rather than these gutless snakes that we have in there now. All of them. I mean, they're all careerists. All of them. all of them, or 99% of them. So think about that. Again, stake a claim, don't leave the playing field, and make yourself heard.